Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be talking about the third chapter of Lamentations. I haven't actually posted any of these yet, so I imagine I'll be posting them, at least the first three chapters, all at once. Lamentations is a 5-chapter book that is a lament over Jerusalem. Commentators used to assign this to Jeremiah. Then again, the language, the poetry, the shift in tone and focus doesn't sound like Jeremiah. On the other hand, Jeremiah is the most prominent prophet who endured the destruction of Jerusalem and saw a lot of his family, a lot of his friends suffer due to that siege. And so that's why it's associated with that prophet. Lamentations begins with the city personified as a woman in the first 2 chapters. The Hebrew Bible and the New Testament doesn't use female allegories very often. And so personifying the city as a woman is both something that we will see in Revelation when the church is adorned, and the church is pictured as the city of God, is adorned as the bride for Christ. And at the same time, it reminds us both of the vulnerability of Jerusalem and the vulnerability of women in general at that time. As we are in a time when we are vulnerable, it is a reminder to us, not just of what happened 2,500 plus years ago. The destruction of Jerusalem was in 587 BCE, but it reminds us of the vulnerable in our midst. It reminds us of those who might not have safe housing, of those who are worried about domestic violence. It reminds us of those who might not know where their next meal is going to come from, or who have to work but can't work in safe conditions. We have seen, I'm sure all of us, numerous reports about people here at National Frozen Foods in Albany or working in meat processing plants. So as I, in this time of quarantine and in this place of sadness, worry about it, Lamentations is perhaps a good book for us to consider. The third part of Lamentations, the third poem, because it's really a series of 5 connected poems, is an acrostic as well. An acrostic is something that is a poem that spells something out. And for Lamentations, 4 of the 5 chapters, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, are the alphabet. It's a way to learn the Hebrew alphabet in sadness. The third part of Lamentations is not just 1 acrostic, but it is 3 acrostics. It is Aleph, 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 Beit, 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 Gimel, 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 all the way through. And because of that rendering, the poetry is short staccato. They are very quick lines back and forth. And when the verse numbers were added to the Bible in the 16th century, the third chapter of Lamentations, because of that acrostic nature, because it was a triple acrostic, it is 66 verses long. The number of words in it might be somewhat similar to the first couple of chapters. They're 66 very short verses, because the Hebrew alphabet is 22 letters. Unlike the first 2 chapters of Lamentations, the third chapter focuses, I am the one who has seen affliction under the rod of God's wrath. It focuses on a man who is saying, I am the one who has endured anger. It uses language that seems to resonate with exile, of being driven away, of being trapped. Verse 7. He walled me in with no way out. How many of us right now feel walled in of our apartment or our house? How many feel like we can't leave where we are? It is someone who feels trapped. That is certainly language that I can resonate with right now. However, the middle of this poem, some people look at as the heart of Lamentations. I look at it as the heart of this third chapter, but not necessarily the heart of the book. From verse 22 and onward, the Lord's acts of loyalty have not ended. His compassion is not used up. They are renewed every morning. Vast is your faithfulness. My portion is the Lord, I say to myself, therefore I hope in him. Good is the Lord to those who hope in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait and be still for the Lord's deliverance. It is good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth. He should sit alone and be still. For he laid it upon him. He should put his mouth in the dust. Perhaps there is hope. He should offer his cheek to the smiter, eat his fill of shame. For the Lord will not spurn forever. Rather, he hurts and then shows compassion as befits his vast loyalty. For he does not willingly afflict or hurt human beings. You might have recognized some of those words from one of the great hymns in Christianity. Great is your faithfulness, O Lord my Father. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. The inspiration for that comes from verses 22 through 24 of the third chapter of Lamentations. In the middle of a book where people are sad and sorrowful, in the middle of a book where the author, in the middle of a poem, in the center of the book, where the author is saying that they are cast out by God, the author reminds that God will not afflict forever. In verse 55, I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help, but give me relief. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. This chapter, to me, gives the reminder that I can say over and over again, God, this is awful. I don't like seeing people who are hurting and suffering. It doesn't seem fair and it doesn't seem right. And God says, it's not fair. It's not right. It reminds us that in the midst of pandemic and pain, God is with us. This one also ends with a cry for vengeance, which I think is a very human emotion. I think very often we want to see the people who have angered and frustrated us, the people who have annoyed us, get what we are sure is coming to them. It is good to remember that God is merciful, and that if God's mercy applies to those who frustrate, annoy, anger, make us want to tear our hair out, that God's mercy might even apply to you and to me. The third chapter of Lamentations starts with a litany of complaints, but lifts us to the reminder that the one that we complain to is the maker of the sun, moon, and stars. He knows the number of hairs on our head, and he is with us in the midst of quarantine, in the midst of work and labor, in the midst of all that we do. Amen.